If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all 3 books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and yes, I am still alive. I did not plan to drop off the map the way I did right when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, but I've been having problems. Short version is, I decided to upgrade my technology. New computer because the old one was starting to get problems with it. New editing software for making videos. And I've had nothing but problems with them ever since. I've been getting the runaround with tech support. Newer or different programs just haven't been working for me at all. And I finally got to the point where I just decided, you know what, I can't wait anymore, so I've reverted back to my old technology. The moral of this story being that just because something is new doesn't mean it isn't broken. But enough about that. I'm not here to talk about what I've been doing while I was away. I'm here to talk about Godzilla vs. Kong. Specifically, the fact that it is doing gangbusters. The 2 biggest surprises regarding Godzilla vs. Kong are that 1, it is doing much better than anyone expected, especially after Godzilla King of the Monsters didn't meet expectations, and 2nd, that it's doing incredibly well in theaters. At a time where people were convinced that theaters were going to die and that Godzilla vs. Kong was going to flop in theaters but only do well on streaming where it was simultaneously released, turns out it's actually doing well on both platforms. Last time I checked, the streaming numbers had exceeded Wonder Woman 1984 and Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the box office numbers are the highest they have been in a very long time, certainly since the pandemic started. It's all pretty surprising, and I think it's worth looking into how we got here. Because back in 2019, after Godzilla King of the Monsters underperformed, it didn't flop, but it didn't do as well as people were thinking it would. After that happened, people were convinced the Monsterverse was dead. And once the pandemic hit and theaters started closing down along with practically everything else, people started saying, well, theaters are dead too, and the future of movies is going to be on streaming. Most people are just going to want to watch every new movie on their phones or on their TVs or computers or whatever, and never go to the theater again, because going to the theater is too much of a hassle. And yet both of those notions are being proven incredibly wrong. Godzilla vs. Kong is doing so well that the future of the Monsterverse is not really a question of if, but a question of when and in what capacity. We do already know that there's still that Skull Island anime in the works, and may as well get into spoilers a little bit here. I think it's safe to say that series will be a prequel given the status of Skull Island when we open Godzilla vs. Kong, namely that it's been destroyed. But anyway, getting back on track, the future of the Monsterverse seems more certain because the movie is doing incredibly well and the merchandise is really selling and everything. And it seems to be bringing back theaters. So, how did that happen? That's what I'm here to try figuring out today. If it's all the same to you guys, I'd like to address the movie theaters question first. Because it really did seem, to a lot of people at least, like movie theaters were done for. I was not one of those people, I want to be very clear, and I'm feeling kind of good about being vindicated at this point, but even I felt like maybe movie theaters would have to evolve somehow if they wanted to continue in the age of streaming. And some people were saying, well, maybe they'll survive, but they'll be more of a novelty, sort of like what drive-ins became. They won't become the primary mode of seeing new movies anymore. Yet it turns out that's not the case. People are either going to see Godzilla vs. Kong in theaters first and then going right back home to stream it as much as they can before it gets taken off HBO Max, Or they watch it on HBO Max and think, you know what, I've got to see it in theaters at least once. And people are going back. Which doesn't surprise me at all. I did this whole video months ago about why I didn't think movie theaters were going anywhere. I gave multiple reasons, like it's a good dating location, which is something I didn't see a lot of people talking about. Then again, most people online are introverts who don't generally go out anyway. I know because I'm one of them. But I also said that it was part of society. That sort of thing doesn't just go away. It might go away if there just aren't any movie theaters left, and given how frequently they were closing during the lockdowns, it seemed like there was a possibility there might not be any left by the time we reopened. Turns out, people are going back. Okay, enough of repeating myself. I do think there are reasons why this is happening. One of those reasons is that people miss going to the theater. Yes, when going to the theater was an option you could do at basically any point you wanted, you could kind of grumble about all the inconveniences. You gotta drive all the way to see this movie you don't even know if you'll like, and then of course if you want snacks, that's gonna cost you a bundle, and that's on top of the ticket price that you already paid, which has gone way up since years ago. Yes, you could point to all of those things and say that going to the movies was a miserable experience. But then we had that option taken away from us for the better part of a year. And sometimes you don't realize how much you actually love something until you don't have the ability to do it anymore. Once it's taken away, you start to appreciate it. And once you get it back, you don't waste it. Now, of course, streaming does have plenty of conveniences that going to a theater doesn't have. You can adjust the volume to your liking. You can sit in a nice comfy chair all by yourself and spread your limbs out as far as you want them to. You can pause to get up and grab a snack or use the bathroom. There are plenty of advantages to streaming something from home. However, convenience is not always a substitute for experience. And going to the movie theater is an experience. First of all, there's just the fact that you can see the movie on a screen much, much bigger than most people can ever fit in their homes. That is not replicatable for the vast majority of the population. You can only get that by going to a theater. But also there's just this idea that going to the theater is a communal experience. First of all, you can meet friends there, or you can meet a date there, but let's not get into the dating stuff right now. Just meeting with friends is something significant. Again, that's something most of us haven't been able to do for a very long time. But even separating it from the whole lockdown thing, it's just a fun thing to do with friends. You guys want to get together because you haven't seen each other all week, or maybe it's been a little longer since you did something together? Let's all watch a movie. And rather than try and figure out who's going to host and therefore who's going to have to get all the snacks and everything prepared, hey, there's this new movie out in theaters that we're all pretty interested in seeing. Let's all just go there. We'll let them be the hosts. And you can have fun having conversations before the movie. Some theaters have like arcade games set up that you can do if you arrive early enough or want to stay later. And they have the snacks, of course. I mean, you can make popcorn at home if you want, but sometimes theater popcorn is what you're more in the mood for. And then, of course, you get to sit there and you get to either enjoy a movie or enjoy hating a movie or just commiserate with how horrible a movie might wind up being. And then, of course, you take into account the fact that there are other people in the theater. And when a bunch of people are together enjoying something, you can feel that in the room. And that increases everyone's enjoyment. There's that communal aspect of going to the theater that a lot of people have missed. And now that they've got it back, I don't think any of them want to waste it. Now, when I saw Godzilla vs. Kong in the theater, don't worry, I was careful, there were some people there who clearly had forgotten theater etiquette, turn your darn phones off, but aside from that, it still had that communal experience. We still had that same enjoyment of seeing this movie on a big screen. And that's just not replicatable anywhere but a movie theater. Maybe the only other place you might get it is in live theater, but live theater has a completely different set of rules, of course. And we're not talking about that here. So, not to gloat, but I called it. Movie theaters are going to survive. I don't think that means that streaming is going to die. I certainly think that hybrid releases, like what we've been seeing recently, are going to continue for a little bit at least. But I don't think streaming is going to kill movie theaters. If streaming is going to kill anything, it's going to be TV as we know it, cable and satellite sort of thing. But even then, that's probably going to take a while. And who knows, even that's not necessarily guaranteed. But theaters, they're definitely sticking around. And I am just very pleased that the movie which is saving those theaters is a kaiju movie featuring Godzilla and King Kong. But that does leave us with the question, why Godzilla vs. Kong specifically? It's a valid question. Of all the movies that could have brought people back to the theaters, why this one? Part of it could just be that it's the first major release of 2021, and one of the first major blockbuster releases in a very long time. So movie audiences are perhaps just anxious to get out of the house and see anything, and Godzilla vs. Kong fit the bill. That, I think, is certainly a possibility. It might even be part of the puzzle. But I do think there's more to it than that. Far more, in fact. After all, let's not forget, last year, in the midst of the lockdown, Christopher Nolan's Tenet was released exclusively in theaters with the thought that it would somehow be the test, if you will. If people went to see that, that meant theaters would survive, and if not, theaters were dead. Nobody went to see Tenet, and by most accounts, it's not worth seeing anyway. I don't know, I haven't seen it myself yet, but the fact is that since people didn't go to see it, and Christopher Nolan is considered a darling by Hollywood, everyone thought, well, that's it, sound the bell, the theater is gone. Of course, that changed now. But again, why Godzilla vs. Kong? Before filming this, I saw a video by Midnight's Edge on the subject, which placed a great deal of emphasis on merchandise sales. And yeah, merchandise really has been moving for this film. Recently, most of the merchandise has actually become really difficult to find because every time it pops up at Walmart or on Walmart's website, it's snatched up by the scum of the earth. I mean greedy SOBs. I mean scalpers and price gougers who are rotten to the core. Sorry, I'm a little bitter. Give me a moment. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of my system, yes, the merchandise has been selling out in most places since the movie's release. But then again, it was also selling out even before the movie's release. And so was the merchandise for King of the Monsters after the movie was released on DVD and Blu-ray, and those sales wound up increasing and actually getting the movie the audience that didn't wind up seeing it in theaters. Now, the conclusion reached by Midnight's Edge is that since the toys have been selling so well, the idea is that Godzilla vs. Kong was being reworked, if you will, to be aimed more at children, which we have gotten some confirmation that younger audiences were in mind for this film, and that is the largest reason why this movie is doing well. I agree that that's probably another part of the puzzle, but I don't necessarily think it's as big a piece as Midnight's Edge is making it out to be. I'm not here to try and somehow call out Midnight's Edge. I just don't think that's the whole story. After all, let's not forget that even though King of the Monsters underperformed at the box office, the DVD and Blu-ray sales were incredible. It found its audience after it was in theaters. And that, I think, is a pretty good indicator that the movie did have an audience. The audience just didn't go to see it on the big screen for some reason. I, for one, don't believe that box office alone is a measure of quality. It can sometimes be correlated to lack of quality. If a movie is bad and it also has poor box office, you can generally conclude that the one led to the other. Hellboy 2019 was a bad movie, so nobody went to see it, which means it didn't make much money. But that's not always the case. You remember Batman Mask of the Phantasm? animated film connected to Batman the Animated Series, which is considered one of the best incarnations of Batman ever. Plus, it's Batman. Batman is always popular, it seems. But Batman Mask of the Phantasm really flopped in theaters. Theatrically released, but it went in and out with hardly anyone caring. It didn't find its audience until much later, and nowadays it's considered a masterpiece. It is in fact considered by some to be the Batman movie, better than anything made by Tim Burton or Christopher Nolan. And of course there's the inverse, where something like Michael Bay's Transformers films are rarely held in high regard by anyone, yet they always make back money. So, again, I don't think that box office alone is a measure of quality. I think that if it measures anything, it measures interest at the time. And lack of interest can be for any number of reasons. With Batman Mask of the Phantasm, it might have been because it was the 90s and people still thought, well, cartoons are for kids, I don't want to go watch a cartoon, so nobody bothered. And with King of the Monsters, who knows? It was released simultaneously with the live-action Aladdin remake and just a few weeks after Avengers Endgame, which just... everything released immediately after Avengers Endgame didn't perform as well as expected. So I think that's definitely a factor. Why Endgame sucked all the air out of the room, I don't know, but clearly there's something there. But either way, just because people didn't see King of the Monsters in theaters didn't mean it had no audience, and that audience found it after the fact. And by finding it after the fact, it led them to the other movies, and of course built up more hype for Godzilla vs. Kong. And the trailer, last time I checked, is still the highest viewed trailer of 2021 so far. It might have been surpassed, or if it hasn't yet, it could still potentially be surpassed at some point. But it was the most viewed trailer of 2021 for a pretty good chunk of time. And that anticipation had to come from the fact that people really did want to see this movie. And I think part of that is because they discovered the Monsterverse films afterward. Those of you who have followed me for long enough know that I value escapism. I think that escapism tends to get a bad rap. People think that art has to be about something in order for it to matter, and if it's not about anything, if it's just entertainment for entertainment's sake, then it is somehow inferior. And hey, sometimes it is, but then again, sometimes art that tries to be about something clearly botches it and winds up actually being worse than most escapism. So I don't think it's just an either-or question. But Godzilla vs. Kong is definitely aiming for escapism. I don't necessarily think it's as devoid of meaning as some critics are claiming. I do think there's substance there. It's not as much substance as the previous films, certainly, but there is some substance there. But that substance isn't really the point. The main point, as so many people have been putting it, is big lizard fight big monkey. That's the point of the movie. And I think audiences are finding that incredibly refreshing. Again, partly because we've just come out of a particularly hellish year and we'd like something to divert our attention for a little bit, but also just because it's refreshing to have a movie that doesn't ask you to do anything other than just sit back and enjoy the ride. Pretty much since 2016, when the Ghostbusters reboot came along, we've seen a steady decline in the idea of entertainment being entertainment. Now all of a sudden, you had to have identity politics attached to it somehow. And so often, it was just used as an excuse to defend outright bad filmmaking. You try to point out problems in the script, problems in the characterizations, and the automatic built-in defense, thanks to identity politics, is it's not a bad movie, you're a bad person for not liking it, because you hate whatever group is represented within this movie. You hate women, you hate black people, you hate gay people, and thus the conversation gets completely derailed. But Godzilla vs. Kong comes along, and it doesn't have any of that stuff attached to it. There have been people who tried to make mountains out of molehills. Some time ago, there was an interview that spoke about how Godzilla vs. Kong had 2 women at the core of its film, which is technically true. And there were some people who came along and said, aha! This means the movie is about feminism. Doesn't that make you mad? In response to that, the kaiju fandom collectively stood up and said, no. We've had plenty of kaiju movies where there have been female characters. Why would that make us mad? And really, that's been the case with the Monsterverse all along. The Monsterverse has had very diverse human characters, and it's not a point of contention because people haven't made it a point of contention. Which, if you ask me, is actually progressive. You look at Godzilla vs. Kong, for example, Gia is considered the best human character in that whole film. She's the little girl who has the connection with Kong, and she's deaf. Not just in the movie, of course. The actress who plays her, sorry, don't know her name off the top of my head, but she is deaf in real life. And when was the last time you saw a major blockbuster movie with a deaf main character? I can't really think of one I've seen in a while. There aren't many movies in general that do that. I mean, the only other movie I can think of is Defiula, this really obscure vampire movie that was done entirely in sign language. And it's also considered one of the worst vampire movies ever made. Not because it's all in sign language, but just because it's bad. It's campy and hokey and everything you can think of. But that's beside the point. Godzilla vs. Kong has this character at its core, and the fandom is accepting her just as she is. Everyone is saying she's the best human character. She's the heart of the movie. Aside from the monsters, of course, she's the only one we actually care about. And it's not because she's deaf. It's not like we're saying, we like you because you are different, and therefore we accept you while noting that you are not like the rest of us, which is not accepting. It's still keeping her at a distance because of how different she is. Instead, we're just saying, we accept this character because she's a good character. And we accept the actress because she's giving a good performance. We're doing all of that, and there's no controversy. And the movie's not making a big deal out of it either. It has all these different kinds of characters, male, female, black, white, Latino, Asian, what have you. And it's just presenting them and saying, this is the cast of the movie, and here's what the movie is about. Have fun watching it. Really, the Monsterverse has done that the whole time. Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, they haven't made a big deal out of the fact that they have diverse casts. Again, with King of the Monsters, people tried, but it didn't take. And I think movie audiences are looking at that and going, finally! Because we've spent so much time seeing these movies come along, some of them parts of really big franchises like Star Wars or Star Trek or Terminator or what have you. And they get bogged down in all of this stuff, and inevitably that winds up derailing the conversation when you try to critique them. But Godzilla vs. Kong doesn't have that problem. And honestly, I think that might be a relief to everyone. A movie that's just a movie. What a novelty these days. And I don't blame anyone. Escapism is a great thing. Escapism is fun. Sure, it doesn't necessarily get you thinking about the human condition or stuff like that. But who says you've got to be thinking about that the whole time? Sometimes you just want to have fun. And Godzilla vs. Kong is undeniably fun. And that's speaking to people. So that's where I stand. That's why I think Godzilla vs. Kong is doing so incredibly well. And again, I'm very, very pleased that of all the movies that could be succeeding this year, it's a kaiju movie. Does that necessarily mean that kaiju movies are going to become the next big thing? I don't know. But right now, kaiju movies are on top. At least one is. Anyway, I've had that pent up for a while, and it feels good to get it out. I'm going to try to get back on track with my video making henceforth. Hopefully my new technology gets all of its issues resolved soon. But until then, I'm back to using the old stuff. And I will try to not leave you for as long as I did. And that's all I have to say at the moment. Got it all out now. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.